Welcome to Formula One Focus. Almost time for the first race of the year. Next weekend is Australian Grand Prix. But before we get there, it's time to have a bit of a look at what happened at the testing and what you and I, you meaning HUWU, noticed from the testing. And I'm going to ask you a couple of questions about that. But anyway, welcome back, you. It's nice talking to you again.
Yeah, nice to be back. Nice to be talking Formula One again. I can't believe it. Is it this weekend that the season starts? That
Next
feels
weekend.
unbelievably soon.
Next week.
Okay. So it's not. So it's but starting in Australia. I guess in South Africa you don't have the quite extreme that we have when in the UK when we're watching Australia, where we get up at 6 a.m., 5 a.m. to watch it, and we're all on the sofa under our blankets and things with a cup of tea watching the races. Because in the UK, that's a big part of how you know Formula One is back, is you have to get up early to watch the games in Australia. I guess it's mid-morning for you guys in South Africa.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's about 8 hours ahead of us, and you about 2 hours behind us.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a bit more of a slip for you guys. It's more of a problem for us when they go to the US at Las
Yeah.
Vegas Grand Prix. I mean, nobody watches that, in Europe or anywhere else. If you ask me, it's just too damn late or too early for that.
Yeah, but the poor Australians, they have to put up with that for the whole rest of the year. So if you're an Australian Formula One fan, fair play.
Yeah, no, well, you get your one race you can watch in your own time. The rest you have to struggle.
Yeah. Oh,
I
and
feel sorry
the
for them.
wor the worst thing as well is when you set your alarm wrong for an hour too late and you switch on like just on the last few laps and you've missed the whole thing. So you're spoiled, but you've
Mm.
still missed it as well. And it's just that's the nightmare. That's the nightmare. Because it's normally around where the clocks change from summertime to meantime as well.
When is your
And
changing, by
so
the way? Good question.
I don't know. Thing is, you don't know anymore because all your clocks are connected to the internet. So they change automatically. So you don't have to
Oh, is
change
it?
them yourself.
I didn't know that.
Well, no, I get that on your phone and on your laptop and stuff. I don't actually have any analog clocks in my house, I don't think at the moment.
Huh. Well, in South Africa, we've got quite a big country, but we're all in the same time. So, we can handle it. If we wake up a bit earlier, it's not the end of the world for us. So, all right, let's talk about I was going to ask you about the constructors first. Our top five constructors, yours, and then compared to mine, and we have a bit of a discussion. And then the same thing for the drivers, because you and I are definitely not going to see eye to eye on the drivers. I can see it already. So let's start with the teams. Who do you think is going to end up in fifth? Because we know with the all-rounds, we know Sauber's going to end last, and Haas is probably not going to be there. If you looked at what we saw last week, and I know it's very limited, I know you can't really read into it too much, but I mean there were some signs of what's going to come to a degree. Who was your fifth best team? It was going to be your
Yeah,
fifth best team.
it's tricky, isn't it? Because we know who the top four are going to be. It's just about picking the order. But with fifth, this feels like an opportunity, and everyone's talking about because of the huge rule change that's coming next year. There's a lot of teams who are incentivized not to really try this year. So I think there will be a team who ends up being fifth and realizes it and starts actually pushing this year when they realize that they've got an opportunity for fifth. In the past, it will be Aston Martin, but I don't think Aston Martin are going to be doing great this year. I didn't realize that Adrian Newey only started the other day. I thought he'd
Was it
been
a
working
Monday?
since
Yeah.
since January 1st, but no, he's only been working since this week. So I'm going to go. The teams that people seem to be talking about are Alpine and Williams. Now, Alpine have been a bit of a mess up until now, but I do think that fifth is within their grasp, especially if Aston Martin fall away. And then Williams is the funny one that apparently Williams haven't even got a new chassis this year. It's just like a tweaked car from the previous year. But they've got two proper drivers this year, and organizationally they seem to be getting better. So it's between those two, and I think I'm going to go for Alpine because they're getting. I agree with you that they're getting sold this year, and I think that they're trying to put themselves in the shop window. So one way or another, I think they're going to make that happen.
Yeah, the problem is that engine they've got there, it's not going to be, no, it's no longer going to be developed. Their chassis is also a year old. They're using last year's chassis. They've got good drivers. Poor Jack Doohan, I mean, is onto hiding for nothing. He's probably going to get fired within a couple of races to get Frank Colapinto in there so they can get a bit more money. They said they're going to use Mercedes engines from next year. So I think the difference between Alpine and Williams is going to be the fact that Williams is now a much better organized team, like you mentioned rightly, and then it's a much better managed team, but it's got better drivers. They're going to have a Red Bull situation. They're going to have Pierre Gasly doing very well, and then whoever it is in the second seat, Jack Doohan or Franco Colapinto, struggling to keep up. and they're not going to score points with both drivers. Whereas I think Williams are going to score consistently with both drivers, and that's going to make the difference at the end of the day. So I'm pitching Williams for fifth. My thoughts.
I can see that. I can see that. We can see who's right at the end of the season. Of course, Williams did the classic thing of going for a glory run on day 2 of testing to get the sponsors interested.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. But I mean, they have the sponsors now. That's an interesting thing. We mentioned last week about the liveries. I wanted to just briefly talk to you about that. You and I both raved about the Sauber livery, and it ended up on track being a complete
Oh
and utter
yeah,
disaster. What did you think of that?
yeah, just well photographed in the dark. Maybe it'll look better in places like Singapore and in Bahrain when it goes to sort of in the evening shifts and things. But yeah, I think we've been had, is what we say in Britain. We've been had by
Mm.
the reveal.
Interesting thing about Sauber, that just while we're on the subject, Jonathan Wheatley is going to start there earlier. That he was from Red. He's going to become the team principal now at Sauber, coming from Red Bull. So now with Mattia Bonotto there and him, Jonathan Wheatley, that's the proper Audi team from next year for next year management team. I think they're going to shake things up a bit. They're going to do better than last year. Maybe still end up last, just as a on the by and by, but um, definitely not going to be still better last year, but still lost. So I just wanted to say that. But shame, we're Sauber. Anyway, next up, number 4 for you.
Number 4, I am going for Red Bull Racing in
Ooh.
4th place.
Yo, sacrilege. How do you
Well,
get to that?
I just think that team is on the precipice of a complete collapse. I think the stars are aligning for the downfall of Red Bull. I don't think they had a great test. I think that they looked struggling. Did you see? I don't know how much of testing you saw, but at one point Max Verstappen came across the line and backed off, and you could see his head was shaking in the car. He was shaking his head in the car. Apparently, they were trying different wings. They did the minimum number of laps, as in they did less than anybody else.
Mm.
Their reliability wasn't great. And no Newey, I think that's important. If you accept the paradigm that this year is going to be a continuation of last year, then they were on a downward trajectory in the second half of last year. And I think that's going to continue this year. I think the Honda is starting to step away in terms of supporting them from the engine side. And I can see Max being destabilized because even if they're only second quickest, I can see him becoming destabilized at some point. And apparently, they're saying that the car is easier to drive this year than it was last year. And if so, that might suit Lawson. And if Lawson gets a little bit too close, that might hurt Max as well. Again, a destabilizing factor. And Christian Horner seems to just be in the news for the wrong reasons every single week at the moment. I didn't realize that he still has a court case going on that apparently the UK press is banned from talking about.
What court
And
case is that?
I think it's still to do with his run-in with, allegedly, his run-in with one of the female staff members at Red Bull with the
Same story
WhatsApps
from
and
last
things.
year.
I think so anyway, unless there's been a new one. And you've also had we've had our latest monthly Red Bull controversy with the mechanics book, where he's talking about what some of the engineers were doing with their laptops on the pit wall and things. I just think it's primed to all fall apart, and the interest from the parent company might be dwindling. So that's my hope.
Talk to me
Hope,
about
I
the
mean
laptops.
expectation.
Talk to me about the laptops on the wall.
Do you not know this story?
No. Is it Callum Nichols that designed recently? Is it him? The guy who
So
wrote it?
one of the mechanics, one of the kind of better known mechanics, has written a book about his time working for Red Bull, and in the book he tells a story about how one of the senior managers at Red Bull was, for a joke, going around with not safe for work material on his laptop in the garage.
Okay. Let's not go there. Let's leave that there. I think you are hoping for Red Bull to do worse than last year, rather than knowing that they will, seeing that your loyalties don't lie with them. I think if you look at last year, you're right. Red Bull didn't win the constructors, but Red Bull didn't win the constructors simply because they only had one driver scoring, which is exactly what I refer to with Alpina. If Sergio Perez scored like he should have scored as the second driver in that team, Red Bull would have won the championship last year. So they're not as bad off as I think they are. They improved the car in several aspects. They said They wanted to make it easier to drive, exactly like you mentioned, because if Max Verstappen is struggling with a car's driving, then there's a problem. And then people are accusing them a little bit of sandbagging as well as Ferrari. I don't think they're going to end up fourth. I honestly think they're going to end up third. I think Mercedes, in my book, is going to end up fourth because they just do not seem to be able to get the hang of these new regulation cars, and I think it's going to grin and bear it, sit out this year, and hope that next year's car is going to make the difference for them. So for me, especially with that young Kimi Antonelli in the team, going to have the same situation. Very quick, but still a rookie. He's going to make rookie errors. It's going to cost the team points. George Russell might be able to carry the team for a bit, but in my book, I think Mercedes definitely fourth, Red Bull third.
I can see that. I can see that.
And your third place?
Yeah, my third will be Mercedes. It's funny, the change in the narratives around teams is that whilst Lewis was there for the last few years, the press was always looking for reasons why it was going wrong with Mercedes and what something that was up, and we'd hear Toto Wolff get quoted a lot more. And that's all like with Lewis going to Ferrari, all the attention, at least from the UK point of view, has gone to Ferrari as well. So we're not hearing as much about Mercedes. But everyone seems to be saying that they've had a better test, the cars have improved and things. But still hearing some of the same things that we heard. Like as a former Mercedes fan, we had our hopes gotten up several times in terms of they finally fixed it, and it never materialized. So I don't think that they're going to be fighting for the title. I agree with you that I think Antonelli's going to make rookie mistakes, which is fine. I don't think he should be cast out for that, but I think it will happen. And there's a different pressure on George as well this season, because in the last 3 seasons, it's just been enough for George to beat Lewis half the time, and that was fine. But now he's the team leader, and it's on him to drive the development of that car. And we don't have much data to suggest that George Russell's able to do that yet. So it's a completely different vibe. And I can just see Mercedes kind of just being slightly forgettable this season. And they might win a race, because you've got to remember, how many races this year? 24, 25?
25, yeah.
It wasn't that long ago. It was only 16, 17. I think a lot of people are still in the mindset of we've only got a 16, 17 race season. Whereas actually with 25, it'd be pretty remarkable if only 2 teams win races all season. So I can see George Russell picking up a win at some point, but I don't think that they're going to be regularly able to challenge the top 2.
Yeah, that Mercedes has never been good at all tracks. So that's the thing. It's like Belgium, they won last year. They're good at that track, but they're not good at it on a street circuit, for example. And I think that's going to carry forward. Like I said, I think for this year, Mercedes is going to do damage limitation. Just get through this year, and I think they're also going to be one of those teams that's going to stop development on this year's car very soon, very early, and focus on next year. And hope that they get a similar return on the investment that like they did in 2014 when the new engine regulations came in. They just took over from Red Bull and Renault at that time, and they just dominated for many, many years. And then when Red Bull started dominating again with the new ground effects thing, Mercedes were never there. And they've got good designers. That's the thing. James Allison is a fantastic designer, good, proper technical minds, but they've lost a lot of people. Andy Cowell is now was the head of the engine department at High Performance Division, is now the head of the CEO of Aston Martin. Sarah has gone to Ferrari. They've lost so many good engineers. I honestly can't see them, turning it around. Anyway, we've discussed them now. The big question is now, obviously, who remains, Ferrari and McLaren. I know who I'm going to put first, but I'm interested to hear. You just said that you were a former Mercedes supporter. That implies that you're not anymore, and you're probably what now, a Ferrari supporter. So who's your second team, and who's going to be first?
Well, all the noise from testing is about how good McLaren are. The stat that's going around is 30 seconds clear on a race run. But we haven't seen Lewis do a race run, and there's now people saying that maybe Ferrari was sandbagging and things. And I know we disagreed on this in the previous podcast, but I do think that Ferrari's driver lineup is stronger. That's my opinion. And like I said, a 25 race season, and if Ferrari are in and around it, I can see Ferrari winning in Australia or something, because Australia is a weird track. And if that happens, I still have doubts over McLaren. I know you're a massive McLaren fan. I don't want to say they won the title by default last year because they had clearly the best car, but they made a lot of mistakes along the way
Mm.
and they weren't perfect and they still ended up winning it. But a lot to do with, as you rightly pointed out, Checo not pulling his weight in the second Red Bull. So I just think that there's enough here. And look, I've got to try and make this discussion interesting. It's not fun if everybody agrees on everything.
No, I agree.
So uh, I just Forza Ferrari. I just think the momentum's behind them. I can see them getting lucky. I just feel there's a good vibe around that team, and I can see it's. And this is a bold prediction because it's very, very rare that a team only wins a one-off constructors. Normally, teams win 2 or 3 in a row constructors titles. But
I know
I
where you're
want to
going.
believe in the Ferrari hype.
I know
And
where
like I
you're
said,
going.
25 race long season. There's a lot can change between now and the halfway point. Remember, McLaren didn't come good until Miami last year.
Mm.
So it kind of doesn't, to an extent, it doesn't matter how they are now. It's once we get to race 8 that we'll have the rubber's really going to hit the road.
You
So
see, the thing with McLaren last year coming good at Miami was a couple of things happening at the same time. Number one, McLaren improved, but also Red Bull introduced upgrades that went wrong, went badly. So they fell behind. It's not like they stayed static and McLaren overtook them. McLaren moved forward, but Red Bull moved backwards at the same time. And then it took them a long time to catch up again. And Ferrari, to a degree, made the same mistake. Their Spanish Grand Prix upgrade was a complete and utter disaster. And by the time they fixed it, it was too late to overhaul McLaren. Remember that last race, how close Ferrari came to overtaking McLaren? It was so close, 14 points, I think, at the end of the day. That was a bit nerve-wracking. And what you just said now, we disagreed about the driver lineup, who's the stronger. And when I was doing my top 5 driver, put my top 5 driver cap on, I was thinking, and I realized what I was thinking is Oscar and Lando, for example, might be fast and they might be talented. But if I look at the more reliable, more consistently quick, I have to concede it now, even though we didn't agree on it before. I think Ferrari's probably got the better driver lineup on the longer term, in the longer term, if you know where I'm going with this. More consistently scoring points, not flashes of brilliance here and there and then falling apart because of the pressure and the likes. So having said that, Ferrari for me is in second place because of that 30 seconds thing that you were talking about. Yes, sandbagging and everything else. McLaren also obviously wouldn't want to show their hand, the entire hand. If they ended up showing that to the world, there must be more to it than that. So I think that car's taken a leap forward. They're very confident. They've changed the front suspension. I don't know if you saw that with the steering rack and everything, which can't be copied by anybody else. So if that works, they're going to have a competitive advantage that other teams can't easily overtake. It's easy to add a wing here or add a wing there that you can see the other guys doing. And there's still a thing that McLaren might have a sort of a mini DRS that's now
yeah,
supposedly legal, which is an interesting question.
but that's changing a few races in, isn't it? There's a directive coming in a few races in
As
that
far as
might
I know, it's
change
from the
it.
front wing, but I'm not sure. It might be, yeah. But the point is,
And
and yeah,
so the interesting thing that Ferrari has said is the reason they've changed the concept around the suspension is because they believe that there's more scope for development this way, which means that they intend to develop this car. They're not going to set and forget. The reason they've changed it is to develop more. There's only one more season to go. Therefore, they are planning to develop this car heavily during the season, which
yeah,
maybe not everybody else is.
yeah. I said to Hendrik as well on the other pod, as I said, I think the top teams are going to pull away because the smaller teams are going to stop doing any development and they're going to focus on
Yeah,
next year's car. So
I
you're going
agree
to
with
get a
you.
big gap at the end of the year. But McLaren is not just the pull rod and the push rod suspension thing. The way they move the tie rod, I think, to the front of the car, completely different steering design, which is not just the pull rod push rod thing that Ferrari's now changed. McLaren's gone. They've been pull rod for a while now, and I think that's going to be an interesting thing. So yeah, for me, I think, especially taking into consideration Ferrari needs to be penalized with their ugly color scheme. They might lose a few points. So no, for me, it's McLaren by far the team going to win. Like you said, second year in a row, they deserve it anyway. But let's get to the drivers because that's the spicy part. I mean, constructors is one thing. I love the teams, but the drivers are more important. This way, I started thinking about what we just talked about. Who's the stronger lineup? So who have you got in fifth?
It's difficult because there's not a lot to choose. And if you assume that it's going to be the two drivers from the top two teams plus Max Verstappen, is I think not going to shock anybody. That's who I'm going to go for. It's about who's in what order.
Mm,
And then it becomes about in those top two teams, do they fight each other or is one required to be subservient to the other? And I think Oscar Piastri is going to end up being deferring to Lando Norris. That's why I've got Oscar Piastri in fifth place
yeah.
because I think he's going to have to give up a lot of points in support of Lando.
I can't believe it, but I also have him in fifth place for exactly the same reason. Because what's going to happen? They had Papaya Roo's last year. So, they played along, but I saw that this year they're going to do differently. They're going to play rock, paper, scissors. See who's going to who's going to get it the advantage. But the point is, I think Oscar, during the course of the season, is always going to be behind Lando. So when it comes to push comes to shove, Oscar's going to have to defer to Lando, rightly, like you said. Yeah, I agree with you. Fifth place. For me, the question is very importantly, where's Lewis going to end up? Because I know this is the thing that you really upset or excited about. And I saw there was a poll on, I think, Daily Express or something, where people asked, well, they were asked who's going to win, and Lewis was an overwhelming favorite. Clearly, it's a UK poll, but I
Yeah.
mean, I was surprised by that.
Look, after Lewis won the British Grand Prix last year, everyone in the Lewis fan base believed that he was going to win the championship last year. So we get carried away fast. That's just the
Mm,
nature. And that's our prerogative as fans. What's the point of being a fan of something if you can't get carried away?
sure.
But yeah, we get carried away fast. And a lot of people are getting carried away now as well because of how positive he was after testing. So there's like things going around that apparently Lewis is able to brake later than Charles in this Ferrari, and he's able to go back to his old driving style that he was able to do before. And just generally, everybody's gotten their hopes up, which, like I said, happened in Mercedes like 5 times over the
Mm,
last 3 years.
mm,
But the question of Lewis versus Charles is going to come down to qualifying because what we saw last year and the last 3 years, I think it was another podcast summed it up great. It was George isn't fast enough to beat Lewis, but he is fast enough to get in Lewis's way. And I think that could happen with Charles.
mm.
And because I expect Charles to do better in qualifying than Lewis. So if Lewis is in the position of having to overtake Charles every single race, that's really going to hurt him, especially because if you're second, it's very easy to be third. If he's got to overtake a McLaren and Charles every single race, that's going to be tricky. Having said that, I do think that Charles is going to be the man. No, sorry, we're only talking fourth yet, aren't we? We're only on
Yeah, we're
fourth
talking
place.
fourth. Yeah, don't jump the
Okay,
gun.
yeah, jump the gun. Okay, Max Verstappen's going to be fourth.
No, I'm sorry for that, but Lewis is going to be fourth for exactly the reasons you told me now. Charles Leclerc is a better qualifier. He's exceptionally good at qualifying. And Lewis is the new guy in the team. It's going to take a while to settle into the team. It's going to take a while to get used to the car. Max Verstappen can drive a tricycle and still be competitive. This is the way it is. I'm not a fan, but let's be honest, the guy's a good driver. So I see Lewis in fourth place. I think maybe next year might be a different story once he's settled in and, sort of gathered the team around him. Remember, he was been at Mercedes for 11 years. He's sort of part of the furniture there. He was so embedded in that team. Now he's sort of the outsider coming in. It's always difficult to start a new job. You're always a guy, being a little bit unsure of yourself. And we're going to see that. I think we're going to see that on track. I know these guys are professionals and he's a good driver and everything else, but that's just human nature. I think
Hmm.
in that team, Charles Leclerc is definitely going to beat Lewis. Um, Next year being a different story. For me, Lewis fourth, but I think Max is going to be third, simply because the Red Bull for me is going to be third as well, in the team standings. And with Max being so good, it just translates into Max being third.
I can see Max having an Alonso 2012 style season where he doesn't win many races, but he's just always on the podium, and you just
Mhm.
look up at the end of the race and go, "God, he's up there again. How did he do that?" I can see him picking up a lot of third and second places, and maybe only a couple of wins. But I think third or fourth is roundabouts where he'll be, unless that top four from the top two cars are all taking points off each other so much and then Max manages to get
Mm.
some manages to just pick up the pieces, score, put the ball into empty net, as it were. But at the same time, we've seen when Max is under pressure, he does snap, he does crack.
Yeah, I see Damon Hill
So,
had a crack at him this week about it, the way that he drives. If anybody did what Max does to other drivers, if they did it to him, he wouldn't accept it. But his team just sort of glosses over it. And Damon Hill was the guy
mm.
saying that. He's a former world champion himself. I mean, yes, he's maybe British and everything else, but I think there's a bit of merit to that. We saw what Max was up to in Austin last year, Mexico last year. He does not like being under pressure, and he does funny things when he is being put under pressure, and that might start to, come back and bite him.
And if he's not a title contender, he's much more, he's less of, he's less protected. He's less
True.
like kind of shielded. He's less of the golden boy. And, like it or not, Formula One is a show. And we have seen an element of preserving the show, bending the rules to preserve the show, has come in ever since 2021.
Mm.
So maybe my boldest prediction for 2025 is Max Verstappen to get a race ban
Yeah,
at some
well,
point.
yeah, so that's not far-fetched. I mean, Magnussen got one last year. It depends, who's going to be the race director now. We saw, they fired the race director without notice. He didn't know he was going to get fired until a couple of minutes before they put the press release out last year. Niels Wittig. I mean, it's a joke, that thing. So let's get to the second and third place, first place. For me, I think Lando Norris is going to be the champion. He must just, he needs a bit more mental fortitude. If he can get that done, he's going to be the champion. He's going to have the better car than Charles Leclerc. If the Ferrari is anywhere better than the McLaren, Charles Leclerc will win the championship. That's what I think. I think Charles Leclerc is a better driver than Lando, but Lando's going to have the better car. So that's why I'm making Lando my driver's champion for 2025.
I think Sir Lewis Hamilton is going to be the world champion in 2025 because I just think if he's going to be up against Charles and Lando, he just knows how to win titles than better than any of them do. He's got more like I don't he's got more of everything than any Formula One driver has ever had. So I don't think I I just can't quite convince myself that Lando's got what it takes so far. I just haven't seen the evidence
Mm.
for it. Same with Charles. I think I agree with you. I think he's a faster driver than Lando over at least one lap anyway. But again, don't have the data that he can stand up to the heat for the whole season, whereas Lewis Hamilton can.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's going to get it done. And look, I'm being interesting for interesting's sake, and I'm letting my fandom dictate my opinion. But like I said, what's the point of being here if I'm not going to do
No,
that?
a fan is a
So
fanatic. Yeah, I agree with you. I understand
yeah,
it.
so that's why I think, and I can justify it as I just have, but it is a lot of wishful thinking in there,
Mm.
and it is going to be very tough up against Charles. It is going to be very tough. Like I said, if Charles is ahead of him on the grid every race and Lando is ahead of him on the grid every race, he's got his work cut out. And Lewis always has a dip at some point in the season, normally in the first half.
You just mentioned Lewis had more than, or has more than any other driver in Formula One. And one thing he did have that more than any other driver is the opportunity of being in the best car for 9 out of 11 years. Well, no, I'm lying, not that much. Probably 7 out of 11 years. So it's easy to win the championship then, isn't it? You
Well, tell
know?
that to Lando, who had the best car last year and didn't win.
Yeah, he didn't have the best car for the entire year. He only had the best car from Miami.
But that's still the majority of the year. And we've seen drivers go into top teams and top cars and not be able to keep that place.
Mm.
And Lewis has managed to do that. And
Yeah,
Lewis
true.
stuck with Mercedes over a regulation change into the 2017 like super fast cars. And he didn't go to Mercedes when they were the best car. It's not like he jumped ship like Fernando Alonso has tried to do several times, constantly trying to jump to the better car and failing. Like you can look to the 90s, like in the Williams in the late 90s, for example, you had a merry-go-round of drivers in those cars because the car was the best, but the drivers were not, and they weren't able to hold that place. And there's no coincidence that when the team who was banking all their chips on a regulation change in 2014 said we need to go out and get the best driver, they went and got Lewis Hamilton. They could have gotten anybody. They went and got Lewis Hamilton. So there you go. That's my comeback to that argument that
Mm.
Lewis has always had the best car. He earned it and he kept it because he's a champion.
The other side of that is Lewis is 40. He's not. He cannot physically be the same driver that he was at 30. Don't you think that carries a bit of weight?
The, yes, I do. And I do think that he's lost sharpness in wheel-to-wheel racing. I have noticed that, and I do think that's true. But we're in a funny period of sport now here in 2025 where we need to recalibrate what we thought old is for a sports person because sports science has gotten that much better. The athletes are so much smarter. And Lewis Hamilton is just he said himself, like, I don't have a family, I don't have commitments. I know he's got businesses outside of Formula One, but he doesn't have as many distractions as people make out that he should do. And he said that I'm here to win. So I think that 40, and look, no one says this about Fernando Alonso, I will say. No one says when it's Fernando Alonso driving around at 42, everyone goes, "Oh, isn't that amazing?" But when it's Lewis Hamilton, people go, "Oh, he'll have lost it. He can't be doing it at this age."
No, yeah, that's true. That is true. There is a bit of discrimination there. Yeah, I'm interested to see how this pans out, and I'm also sure there's going to be a couple of dark horses, pitching up from somewhere like AlphaTauri winning the 2021 Italian Grand Prix out of the blue with the red flags and everything else. I like those kind of surprises. Yeah, I can't wait for the season. I'm really looking forward to it. So next week we're going to be taking a closer look at what's going to happen in Australia specifically. So I'm looking forward to that. Thanks, you. Appreciate it, man.